rain hammered the cracked pavement outside the downtown shelter as Sarah clutched her 6-month-old daughter, knowing this would be the last time she'd hold her. Her ex-husband's threats echoed in her mind. Find her, or they both die. The homeless man sitting in the doorway looked up with eyes that seemed to see straight through her desperation. "Please," she whispered, placing little Emma in his weathered arms. "Keep her safe." Marcus felt the weight of the infant settle against his chest, her tiny fists clutching at his torn jacket. He'd been living rough for 3 months now, maintaining his cover as just another casualty of the streets. But something about this woman's terror cut through his practiced indifference. Her hands shook as she released the baby, and he caught sight of fresh bruises circling her wrists like purple bracelets. "Mom, I don't think—" he began, but she was already backing away, tears streaming down her face. "His name is David Chen. He has people everywhere. If he finds her—" Sarah's voice cracked. "She's innocent. She doesn't deserve to die for my mistakes." The distant wail of sirens made them both freeze. Sarah's eyes went wide with panic, darting between Marcus and the approaching sound. Without thinking, Marcus stood, the baby secure in his arms, and grabbed Sarah's elbow. "Come on," he said, his training kicking in. "We move now." They ran through back alleys Marcus had memorized during his time on the streets, the baby miraculously quiet against his shoulder. His mind raced through options, safe houses, and exit strategies he hadn't accessed in months. The old farmhouse was 40 miles outside the city, isolated, defensible, and officially abandoned. It would have to do. 20 minutes later, they were speeding north in a stolen Honda Civic, Emma strapped into a car seat Marcus had grabbed from an unlocked minivan. Sarah sat rigid in the passenger seat, checking the mirrors every few seconds. "Who are you?" she asked finally, her voice steadier now. "You're not really homeless." Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "Someone who knows how to stay alive. That's all you need to know right now. David has connections in law enforcement. If you're a cop—" "I'm not a cop." The lie came easily. Technically, he'd been dead for 15 years, so Marcus Williams, FBI agent, no longer existed. "Tell me about these people everywhere. What kind of resources are we dealing with?" Sarah was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible over the engine. "Import business, legitimate on the surface, but David moves other things too. Drugs, weapons, people. He has judges, police chiefs, federal agents on his payroll." Marcus felt ice in his veins. The triads had been expanding their West Coast operations for years, but if they'd penetrated federal law enforcement to this degree, his old contacts might be compromised. Emma started to fuss, and Sarah reached back to touch the baby's foot. "Why now?" Marcus asked. "What made you run tonight?" "I found photos in his office. Children, young girls." Sarah's voice turned flat, emotionless. "Emma's 6 months old. The girls in the photos looked maybe 2 or 3. He was planning ahead. The farmhouse appeared through the trees like a grey ghost, its windows dark and empty. Marcus had bought it through shell companies years ago, a backup plan he'd hoped never to need. As they pulled up the overgrown driveway, he watched Sarah's demeanor change. She stepped out of the car and immediately began scanning the perimeter, noting sight lines and potential escape routes. When they reached the front door, she knelt beside the security panel, hidden behind a loose board, and began working on the wires. "Motion sensors will be armed on the first floor," she said without looking up. "Pressure plates on the stairs. The master bedroom has a panic room behind the bookshelf." Sparks flew as she bypassed the system. "There. We're ghosts now." Marcus stood frozen, Emma in his arms, watching this desperate mother demonstrate tradecraft that would have impressed his former colleagues at Quantico. The way she'd spotted the concealed panel, disabled the system, identified security measures just by looking at the house's layout. This wasn't luck or intuition. "Sarah," he said carefully, "what did you do before you married David Chen?" She stood and dusted off her hands, finally meeting his eyes. In the moonlight, he could see the bruises weren't just on her wrists, But underneath the fear and exhaustion, something else flickered, something dangerous and competent. "I'm good at finding people who don't want to be found," she said simply. "The question is, Marcus Williams, why does a dead FBI agent have a safe house stocked with enough weapons to fight a small war?" The baby cooed softly between them as two ghosts stared at each other in the darkness, each wondering if they'd just found salvation or made their last mistake. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room cast everything in a sickly pale glow, making Sarah's already hollow cheeks appear skeletal. She clutched Emma's small hand as they waited on the cracked plastic chairs, the antiseptic smell burning her nostrils. Her daughter's breathing had worsened overnight, each wheeze a knife twisting in Sarah's chest. "Emma Chen?" A nurse appeared with a clipboard, her expression professionally neutral. Sarah stood quickly, lifting Emma despite her own weakness. 3 days without a proper meal had left her dizzy, but she pushed through it. Her daughter needed her to be strong. The examination room was cramped and cold. Emma sat on the paper-covered table, her legs dangling, too short to reach the floor. Dr. Martinez, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, listened to Emma's chest with practiced efficiency. "Her asthma is definitely flaring," the doctor said, removing her stethoscope. "I'm going to prescribe a new inhaler and recommend we start her on a preventative medication." Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming next. "Will your insurance cover this?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. "We're between insurance right now," Sarah managed. The euphemism tasted bitter. "Between insurance, between homes, between hope and despair." The doctor's expression softened with understanding she'd clearly seen before. "Let me see what samples I can find." "But Sarah, Emma needs consistent treatment. This can't wait." 20 minutes later, they left with a single sample inhaler and a prescription Sarah couldn't afford to fill. The autumn air bit through their thin jackets as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Emma's small hand found hers again. "Mommy, are we going home now?" Home. The word was a mockery. Sarah looked down at her daughter's trusting face and felt something crack inside her chest. They had $43 to their name and nowhere to sleep when the shelter closed for renovations next week. "Soon, baby," she whispered, hating herself for the lie. They walked slowly toward the bus stop. Emma's breathing still labored. Sarah's mind raced through impossible calculations. Medicine, food, shelter. The math never worked. It never would. "Excuse me." The voice was quiet, hesitant. Sarah turned to see the man from the coffee shop approaching. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe early 30s, with green eyes that seemed to hold their own weight of sadness. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "I couldn't help but notice. Is your daughter okay?" Sarah's protective instincts flared. "We're fine." The words came out sharper than intended. He nodded, stepping back slightly. "Of course. I overheard at the hospital. About the prescription." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I might be able to help. We don't need charity." The pride in her voice was automatic, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "It's not charity." He looked directly at her then, and something in his expression made her pause. "I have a proposition. A business arrangement, you could say." Emma coughed beside her, the sound wet and concerning. Sarah felt her resolve wavering. "What kind of arrangement?" He glanced around the busy street, then back to her. "Not here. There's a diner 2 blocks down, Murphy's. Could we talk there?" "Just talk," he added quickly, seeing her hesitation. "I'll buy your daughter something to eat while we discuss it." The mention of food made Sarah's empty stomach clench. When was the last time Emma had eaten something substantial? Yesterday morning at the shelter? "Mummy?" Emma tugged on her sleeve. "I'm hungry." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that she shouldn't trust a stranger. But every maternal instinct screamed louder that her daughter was suffering, and she was powerless to stop it. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Just to talk." The walk to Murphy's diner felt surreal. The man, he still hadn't given his name, walked slightly ahead, giving them space while ensuring they followed. Sarah noticed how he moved, alert and careful, like someone accustomed to watching for threats. The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and grease. They slid into a corner booth, Emma immediately reaching for the crayons and paper placemat the waitress brought over. Sarah ordered her daughter a grilled cheese and soup, ignoring her own growling stomach. "I'm Marcus," the man said once the waitress left, "and I think we can help each other." "How?" Sarah kept her voice low, not wanting Emma to overhear. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "I need a family. Not permanently," he added quickly. "Just for a while, a few months, maybe less. And you need stability, money, a place to live." "I don't understand. I'm asking you to pretend to be my wife. And Emma to be our daughter." Sarah stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "That's insane. Is it more insane than watching your daughter get sicker while you can't afford to help her?" The question hit like a physical blow. Sarah looked at Emma, happily coloring, oblivious to the impossible choice being laid before her mother. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room cast everything in a sickly yellow glow, making Emma's already pale complexion appear almost ghostly. She sat rigid in the plastic chair, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Beside her, Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his weathered coat still damp from the rain. "Mrs. Chen?" A young doctor in wrinkled scrubs approached, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Martinez. I've been treating your son." Emma shot to her feet so quickly that Marcus had to steady her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "How is he? Is he—" "He's stable," Dr. Martinez said, and Emma felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. "But I need to be honest with you. This was a close call. His blood sugar levels were dangerously high. We've got him on insulin, but this kind of episode, it suggests his diabetes isn't being properly managed." The words hit Emma like physical blows. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a strangled sound emerged. Marcus squeezed her shoulder, and somehow his presence gave her the strength to find her voice. "I know," she whispered. We've been rationing his insulin. I couldn't afford—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence that felt like an admission of failure as a mother. Dr. Martinez's expression softened. "Mrs. Chen, I understand more than you might think. But we need to discuss a treatment plan that ensures this doesn't happen again. There are programs, resources—" "I've tried everything," Emma said, her voice breaking. "Every program has a waiting list or requirements I can't meet. I've sold everything I own. I've begged, borrowed." She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting back sobs. Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Doctor, could we perhaps discuss some immediate options? The boy needs consistency with his medication." Dr. Martinez studied Marcus with curious eyes, taking in his shabby appearance and the deference Emma seemed to show him. "Are you family?" Emma and Marcus exchanged a quick glance. Emma started, then faltered. "I'm a friend," Marcus said smoothly. "I've been helping Emma and Caleb however I can." "Well, friend or family, the situation is critical. Caleb needs his insulin regularly, and he needs proper nutrition. I'm also concerned about his living situation. The address on file appears to be outdated," Emma said quickly. "We've recently moved." Dr. Martinez made a note on his clipboard. "I'll need the new address for our records, and I'll have our social worker speak with you about assistance programs." After the doctor left, Emma sank back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. "A social worker," she murmured. "They're going to take him away from me." Marcus lowered himself into the adjacent chair, his movements careful and deliberate. "Not necessarily. But Emma, we need to talk about practical solutions." She looked up at him through her fingers. "What do you mean?" "The insulin, the stable housing, the medical care. These aren't problems that good intentions alone can solve." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I might be able to help. More than just sharing my sandwich, I mean." Emma's brow furrowed. "Marcus, you're homeless. You live under a bridge. How could you possibly—" "Things aren't always what they appear," he said quietly. "I told you I used to have a different life. What I didn't tell you is that some parts of that life, they left me with certain resources." "What kind of resources?" Before Marcus could answer, a nurse appeared. "Mrs. Chen, your son is asking for you, room 237. Emma stood immediately, but Marcus caught her wrist gently. "We'll continue this conversation later. Go to Caleb now." She nodded and hurried toward the elevator, her mind spinning with questions. Resources? What could a homeless man possibly have that could help them? And why was she beginning to feel like there were layers to Marcus that she hadn't even begun to uncover? As the elevator climbed to the second floor, Emma tried to push aside her confusion and focus on what mattered most, seeing her son, holding his hand, assuring herself that he was truly going to be okay. But Marcus's words echoed in her mind. Things aren't always what they appear. When she reached Caleb's room, she found him awake but groggy, and 4 lines snaking from his small arm. His eyes brightened when he saw her. "Mommy, is Marcus here too?" "He's downstairs, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but better." Caleb's voice was thin but steady. "Mommy, I was really scared." Emma took his hand, careful not to disturb the fourth. "I know, baby. I was scared too. But you're going to be fine. Will Marcus stay with us? I like him." Emma smoothed Caleb's hair back from his forehead. "I don't know, honey. We'll see." But as she sat beside her son's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, Emma realized she was beginning to hope that Marcus would stay. Despite her wariness, despite all the questions surrounding him, he had become something she hadn't dared to believe in for a long time. A lifeline. The apartment felt smaller with Marcus in it. Sarah watched him from the kitchen doorway as he sat cross-legged on the living room floor, showing Emma how to fold origami cranes from torn pieces of newspaper. His large hands moved with surprising delicacy, creasing the paper with practiced precision. "Like this, little bird," he murmured, guiding Emma's fingers. "Press firm, but gentle." Emma giggled as her crane emerged lopsided but recognizable. Sarah had never heard her daughter laugh so freely, not since David had started coming around. The sound should have brought relief, but instead it twisted something uncomfortable in her chest. How easily Emma had accepted this stranger. How quickly she'd forgotten to be afraid. Sarah's phone buzzed. Another text from David. "Where are you?" "I came by." "Mrs. Chen said you haven't been home." Her hands trembled as she deleted the message without responding. Mrs. Chen from 3 Billions had always been too observant for her own good. Sarah wondered what else the elderly woman might have told David. What other details he might piece together. "Mama, look!" Emma held up her paper crane, beaming. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Sarah forced a smile, but her mind was elsewhere, calculating risks. They couldn't stay here much longer. David would check the shelters next, then the motels. He had contacts everywhere, people who owed him favors, people who were afraid of him. Marcus glanced up at her, and something in his expression suggested he could read the tension in her posture. "Emma, why don't you make a whole flock? I need to talk to your mama about grown-up things." Emma nodded seriously and bent over her paper, tongue poking out in concentration. Marcus rose and followed Sarah into the tiny kitchen. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes more clearly, the way his clothes hung loose on his frame. But there was something else, too, a steadiness that made her want to trust him, even as every instinct screamed warnings. "You're running from someone," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Sarah's laugh came out sharp and brittle. "What gave it away? The fact that we're hiding in a homeless shelter?" "The way you keep checking your phone, the way you position yourself so you can see the exits, the way that little girl flinches when someone moves too fast." His voice was gentle but knowing. "I've seen it before. You don't know anything about our situation." "I know enough." Marcus leaned against the counter, studying her face. "I know you're scared, I know you're trying to protect her, and I know you don't have anywhere else to go, or you wouldn't be here." Sarah wanted to deny it, to maintain the illusion that this was temporary, that she had options. But the weight of the last few weeks, the escalating threats, the sleepless nights, the way David's grip had tightened like a noose, crashed over her. "He found us before," she whispered. "Last month I tried to leave. Took Emma to my sister's place in Portland. He showed up 3 days later." She touched her ribs unconsciously, remembering. "Said next time he'd make sure I couldn't run anywhere." Marcus's expression darkened. "What about the police?" "He is police." The words tasted bitter. Detective David Morrison, decorated officer, pillar of the community. Who do you think they'd believe? Something shifted in Marcus's face, a flicker of recognition that made Sarah's stomach drop. "You know him," she breathed. For a long moment Marcus didn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I know of him. What does that mean?" "It means David Morrison has a reputation. It means you're right to run." Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. "It also means running might not be enough." The temperature in the small kitchen seemed to plummet. "What are you talking about?" 3 years ago there was a woman named Lisa Hendricks. She tried to leave Morrison too. Marcus met her eyes, and Sarah saw something that looked like old guilt. They found her body in the river 2 weeks later, ruled it suicide. Sarah's knees went weak. She gripped the counter for support, the room spinning around her. "You think he—" "I think David Morrison doesn't like to lose what he considers his property." Marcus's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with something fierce. "And I think you and Emma are in more danger than you know." From the living room came Emma's voice, singing softly to herself as she worked on her paper birds. The innocent sound felt surreal against the weight of Marcus's revelation. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, deliberate. "Because someone should have warned Lisa Hendricks. And because maybe it's time David Morrison faced some consequences for the things he's done." The way he said it made Sarah's blood run cold, but not from fear of Marcus, from hope. Dangerous, desperate hope that maybe she'd found someone willing to fight back. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah watched Marcus cut Emma's pancakes into perfect squares, each piece exactly the same size. Her daughter giggled at something he whispered, syrup sticky on her chin, and for a moment Sarah almost forgot they were running from her husband. "You're very good with children," she said, wrapping her hands around the coffee mug to stop them from trembling. Marcus glanced up, his knife pausing mid-cut. "Had practice. Your own?" The question hung between them like smoke. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he resumed cutting. "Something like that." Sarah studied his profile, noting the way his shoulders tensed whenever she asked anything personal. 3 days they'd been together now, and she knew little more about him than his first name. Yet here he was, treating Emma like she mattered, like she was precious. When was the last time David had shown their daughter such gentle attention? "Mommy, can Marcus come to the zoo with us?" Emma's voice cut through her thoughts. "We're not going to the zoo, sweetheart. Remember, we're traveling." "But he said there might be elephants where we're going." Sarah's eyes snapped to Marcus. "You said what?" "There's a place," he said carefully, not meeting her gaze. "Safe place. They have activities for kids." The way he said it made Sarah's skin crawl. Too rehearsed, too vague. "What kind of place?" "Finish your breakfast, Emma." His voice carried an edge now. "We need to get moving soon." But Emma was already pushing her plate away, more interested in the small origami crane Marcus had folded from her napkin. She made it dance across the table, complete with sound effects. Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I asked you a question." Marcus finally looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? It's complicated. Uncomplicate it. He was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma play. When he spoke, his words were measured. "There are people who help families like yours. Families running from..." situations. What people? People who understand that sometimes the system fails. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. What system? The courts, child services, the police. His voice dropped lower. How many times did you call them about David? How many times did they believe him over you? Sarah's breath caught. She'd never told him about the calls, the reports that went nowhere, the way David charmed every social worker who came to their door. How do you? Because I've seen it before. Marcus's hands were perfectly still on the table. Good mothers trapped by men who know how to work the system. Children who suffer because their fathers have money, connections, lawyers. Marcus, these people I know, they help mothers disappear with their children. New identities, new lives, safe lives. The words should have been a relief. Instead, they felt like ice water in her veins. Sarah glanced around the diner, at the trucker reading his newspaper, the waitress refilling coffee, the cook visible through the kitchen window. Normal people living normal lives while she sat here discussing vanishing into thin air with a stranger. What's the catch? Marcus was quiet too long. There's always a catch, Sarah pressed. Nothing's free, especially not new identities. The families they help, they're grateful. They want to give back. Give back what? Emma dropped her crane, and it fluttered to the floor. As she bent to retrieve it, Marcus leaned closer to Sarah, his voice barely audible. Sometimes good families take in other children, children who need homes, temporary arrangements. Understanding hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're talking about trafficking. I'm talking about helping children who have nowhere else to go. Children like Emma. Children like Emma was before you saved her. Sarah's mind raced. The careful way Marcus had approached them at the gas station, his immediate willingness to help, the fact that he seemed to have endless cash but no visible means of support, the way he'd known exactly what to say to gain her trust. You've done this before, she whispered. I've helped desperate mothers before, yes. And their children? Marcus's silence was answer enough. Sarah's hand moved slowly toward her purse, toward the small canister of pepper spray buried at the bottom. But Marcus caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. Emma needs you, he said quietly. And you need help. Real help. Not the kind that disappears the moment David's lawyers get involved. Emma popped back up with her crane, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. Look, it can fly! She launched it across the table where it landed next to Sarah's untouched eggs. David will find us eventually, Marcus continued. Men like him always do. Unless we make sure he can't. Sarah stared at her daughter's bright, trusting face and felt the last of her options crumble away. The coffee shop buzzed with morning commuters, but Sarah felt completely isolated in the corner booth she'd claimed an hour ago. Her hands trembled as she stirred her third cup, the ceramic spoon clinking against the sides in an anxious rhythm. Marcus sat across from her, his weathered fingers wrapped around a steaming mug, watching her with those unsettling grey eyes that seemed to see everything. You're having second thoughts, he said quietly. Sarah's gaze darted toward the window, where pedestrians hurried past in their neat business attire, living their orderly lives. Wouldn't you? I just helped stage my own daughter's kidnapping. I've crossed a line I can never uncross. The line was crossed the moment you decided Lily was worth more than Rick's games, Marcus replied. Everything else is just logistics. The casual way he said it made Sarah's stomach clench. How can you be so calm about this? Don't you understand what we've done? Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. What I understand is that your husband has been systematically destroying your confidence for years. What I understand is that you've been fighting a custody battle with someone who has unlimited resources and no conscience. What I understand is that sometimes the system fails people and they have to save themselves. His words carried a weight that suggested personal experience, and Sarah found herself studying his face more carefully. Despite his homeless appearance, there was something refined about his speech patterns, something that didn't quite fit with his circumstances. Who are you really? She asked suddenly. Marcus's hand paused halfway to his coffee cup. I told you. I'm someone who wants to help. That's not an answer. Yesterday you were sleeping in a park, but you talk like someone who's been inside a courtroom. You knew exactly how to make this look convincing, exactly what the police would focus on. That's not lucky guessing. The silence stretched between them as Marcus seemed to weigh his options. Finally, he set down his cup and met her eyes directly. My name is Marcus Webb. I used to be a family court judge. Sarah's breath caught. Used to be? I presided over custody cases for 15 years. Watched good parents lose their children to manipulative partners with better lawyers. Watched the system fail families over and over again. His voice carried a bitterness that spoke of deep wounds. I tried to work within the rules, but the rules are written to protect people like your husband. What happened? Marcus's jaw tightened. I made some decisions that certain powerful people didn't appreciate. Decisions that prioritized children's welfare over political connections. I was forced to resign, and my reputation was systematically destroyed. Lost my house, my savings, everything. The same people I'd ruled against made sure I'd never work in law again. Sarah processed this revelation, pieces clicking into place. That's why you were in the park, why you recognized what Rick was doing to me. I've seen his type 100 times. Men who use the legal system as a weapon, who know exactly how to present themselves to get what they want. The courts see a successful businessman fighting for his rights as a father. They don't see the psychological warfare behind closed doors. But if you're a judge, former judge, and currently homeless with a destroyed reputation, not exactly a credible character witness. Marcus's smile was grim. But I know how these cases work, Sarah. I know what evidence matters, what procedures must be followed, and I know that sometimes the only way to save a child is to step outside the system entirely. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. Sarah thought about Lily, probably just waking up in the small apartment Marcus had arranged, confused and frightened, but safe from Rick's increasingly erratic behavior. The police called this morning, she said quietly. They want to interview me again today. That's expected. What did you tell them? That I'd come in this afternoon. They're treating me like a victim for now, but I could see the detective's suspicion. She knows something doesn't add up. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Detective Morrison. I've seen her work before. She's thorough but fair. The key is staying consistent with your story and letting your genuine emotion show through. You are a victim, Sarah, just not in the way she thinks. What if she figures it out? What happens to Lily then? Then we adapt. But for now, she's safe, and you have time to gather the evidence you need to prove Rick's unfit. The bruises will fade, but the psychological evaluations and witness statements we're building will last. Sarah stared into her coffee, watching the cream swirl in pale spirals. Everything felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. 3 days ago, her biggest worry was whether to serve chicken or fish at Rick's business dinner. Now she was sitting across from a disgraced judge, planning her next move in an elaborate deception to save her daughter. I should go, she said finally. Rick will be wondering where I am. Marcus reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. Don't let him convince you otherwise. The motel room felt smaller in the harsh fluorescent light, every stain on the carpet and crack in the walls magnified under Maya's scrutiny. She'd been awake since 3 a.m., watching David sleep in the chair by the window, his weathered hands still clutching the newspaper clipping he'd shown her the night before. The headline haunted her. Local teacher dies in hit-and-run accident. Emma stirred on the bed beside her, small fingers grasping at the scratchy comforter. Maya smoothed her daughter's hair, the gesture automatic even as her mind raced through the implications of David's confession. He'd killed someone. The gentle man who'd bought Emma juice boxes and helped them escape. Marcus had blood on his hands. So did she, in a way. Wasn't she responsible for destroying Emma's father? For the choices that led them to this dingy room, hiding from a man whose violence she'd enabled for too long by staying silent? David's eyes opened as if he'd sensed her watching. They stared at each other across the dim space, two people bound together by desperation and guilt. "You didn't sleep," he said quietly, voice hoarse. "Neither did you, really." Maya shifted carefully, trying not to wake Emma. "That woman in the article. Tell me about her." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Sarah Chen, 32 years old. She taught second grade at Lincoln Elementary." His voice carried the weight of someone who'd memorized every detail. "She was walking home from the school's winter festival. I'd been drinking at Murphy's bar for hours." "Why?" Maya found herself asking, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "It was the anniversary." David rubbed his face with both hands. "My daughter would have been 7 that day, same age as the kids Sarah taught." The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. "You have a daughter?" "Had." The word came out broken. "Lily. She died when she was 3, leukemia." Maya's throat constricted. She looked down at Emma, imagining that kind of loss, that depth of pain. "I'm sorry." Her mother blamed me, said I wasn't there enough during the treatments, that I couldn't handle seeing Lily suffer. David stood slowly, joints creaking. "She was right. I fell apart, started drinking. By the time Lily died, Rebecca had already filed for divorce." The motel room's heater kicked on with a mechanical groan, filling the silence between them. Maya understood now why David had helped them, why he'd looked at Emma with such careful tenderness. "After the accident, I turned myself in," David continued. "Did 3 years for vehicular manslaughter, got out 8 months ago. And Marcus knows this?" David nodded grimly. "Found out somehow, probably ran my fingerprints through his police contacts after he spotted us at the diner. He called me yesterday while you were in the shower." Ice formed in Maya's chest. "What did he say?" "That he'd have me arrested as your accomplice in kidnapping unless I brought you both back to him." David's hands clenched into fists. "Said he'd make sure I went back to prison, but this time for helping a child abductor." Maya felt sick. She'd dragged David into her nightmare, and now Marcus was using his past against him just like he'd always used her fears against her. The pattern was sickeningly familiar. "So you're going to turn us in?" It wasn't a question. David's response was immediate, fierce. "I already made my choice when I helped you leave. But Maya, he's not going to stop, and he has resources we don't." Emma mumbled something in her sleep, and both adults froze until her breathing settled back into a steady rhythm. Maya studied her daughter's face in the weak morning light streaming through the threadbare curtains. Emma looked so young, so trusting. She'd asked for her daddy only once since they'd left, accepting Maya's explanation that they were on an adventure with surprising resilience. "There's something else," David said, pulling a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. "This was slipped under the door while we slept." Maya's blood turned to ice as she recognized Marcus's handwriting on the front, her name written in his precise, controlled script that she'd learned to fear on angry notes left on the kitchen counter. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of the 3 of them at the diner yesterday, clearly taken from outside the restaurant. On the back, Marcus had written, "Bring her home, David. You have until noon." Maya looked at the clock on the nightstand, 9:47 a.m. "He's here," she whispered. "He's been watching us." David moved to the window, carefully shifting the curtain to peer outside. His body went rigid. Blue sedan in the parking lot. Oregon plates. Maya felt the walls closing in, the familiar sensation of being trapped that had defined her marriage. But this time, Emma was in danger too. "What do we do?" she asked. David let the curtain fall back into place, his expression grim but determined. "We run." The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Maya pushed scrambled eggs around her plate, her appetite non-existent despite not eating for nearly 24 hours. Across from her, Emma devoured pancakes with the enthusiasm only a child could muster after a night of uncertainty, while David sat rigid beside the window, his eyes constantly scanning the parking lot. "We can't stay here," he murmured, voice barely audible above the clatter of dishes and morning conversations. "They'll check every motel, every diner along this route." Maya's fork froze midway to her mouth. "Who's they, David? You keep saying that, but you won't tell me who we're running from." His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might finally answer. Instead, he reached across the table and gently wiped syrup from Emma's chin. The gesture was so natural, so paternal, that it made Maya's chest ache with confusion. "Mommy, is Mr. David coming with us to Grandma's?" Emma asked, swinging her legs under the booth. Maya's stomach dropped. They'd never discussed going to her mother's house. She'd only mentioned it once, in passing, weeks ago, when David had asked about family. The fact that Emma remembered that she'd connected their sudden departure with that conversation made Maya realize how much her daughter had been absorbing without her knowledge. "We're not going to Grandma's, sweetheart," Maya said carefully. "But you said if we ever had to leave fast, that's where we'd go. Like in the movies when the bad guys come." David's head snapped toward Maya, his expression sharp. "You told her that?" "It was hypothetical," Maya whispered, heat rising in her cheeks. "A safety plan. Every parent should have one. Not every parent has reason to need one." His words hung heavy between them, loaded with implications Maya didn't want to examine. Emma continued eating, oblivious to the tension crackling across the table. Maya watched her daughter's innocent face and felt the weight of every decision she'd made in the past year pressing down on her shoulders. The late nights, the cash payments, the careful way she'd avoided forming close relationships with neighbors or co-workers. She'd told herself it was about starting fresh, about protecting Emma from the chaos of their old life. But sitting here, listening to her 6-year-old casually discuss escape plans, Maya wondered if she'd been protecting Emma or hiding from something else entirely. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face went white. "We need to leave. Now." He was already sliding out of the booth, throwing money on the table. "David, what?" "Now, Maya." The urgency in his voice sent ice through her veins. She grabbed Emma's hand, not bothering to collect their belongings, and followed him toward the exit. The morning air was crisp, and Maya could see their breath as they hurried across the parking lot. David moved with purpose, his eyes darting between the cars and the road beyond. When they reached their vehicle, he paused, his hand on the driver's door handle. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice strained. "About why I was in that parking lot the night you found me." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Part of her wanted to cover her ears, to maintain the illusion that David was simply a kind stranger who'd appeared when she needed help most. But Emma's safety depended on truth, however ugly it might be. "I was waiting for someone," he continued. "Someone who knew about you, about Emma, about what you've been running from." The words hit her like a physical blow. Maya stumbled backward, pulling Emma protectively behind her. "What are you talking about? I'm not running from anything." David's expression was pained but resolute. "The man who's been following you for the past 3 months. The one who hired me to find you. Maya, he's not going to stop." The parking lot seemed to tilt around her. Maya's carefully constructed world, the new apartment, the job at the clinic, the quiet life she'd built for Emma, crumbled in an instant. "You're working for him?" "I was." David stepped closer, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "But something changed. When I saw you with Emma that night, when I realized what kind of mother you are, what kind of person, I couldn't do it." Emma tugged on Maya's coat. "Mommy, you're scaring me." Maya knelt down, forcing her voice to remain calm despite the panic clawing at her throat. "Everything's okay, baby. We're just going to take another little trip." But as she met David's eyes over Emma's head, Maya knew nothing would be okay again. Whatever she'd been running from had found her, and the man she'd trusted with their lives had been leading it straight to them. The question now was whether David's change of heart was real, or if this was all part of an elaborate trap that was finally closing around them. The rain drummed against the motel window like impatient fingers, each drop echoing the anxiety that had been building in Sarah's chest since Marcus disappeared 3 hours ago. Emma sat cross-legged on the threadbare carpet, coloring in a book they'd bought from the vending machine, her small voice humming a tune Sarah didn't recognize. Where did you learn that song, sweetheart? Emma looked up, crayon poised mid-stroke. Marcus taught it to me. He said his daughter used to sing it. Sarah's hand froze on the coffee cup. His daughter? He showed me her picture when you were in the shower yesterday. She had pigtails like mine but brown hair. The revelation hit Sarah like cold water. In all their conversations, all the desperate planning and shared fears, Marcus had never mentioned having a child. She thought about the way he'd handled Emma so naturally, the gentle patience that had seemed almost parental, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. The door lock clicked, and Marcus stepped in, shaking rain from his jacket. His face was grim, and he avoided Sarah's eyes as he hung his coat on the back of a chair. "We need to talk," Sarah said quietly, glancing meaningfully at Emma. Marcus nodded, understanding. "Hey, Emma, want to watch cartoons? There's a kids' channel on the TV." As Emma settled in front of the small television, Sarah led Marcus to the far corner of the room, keeping her voice low. "You have a daughter." It wasn't a question, and Marcus's shoulders sagged as if he'd been carrying the weight of those words for far too long. Had. Past tense. What happened to her? Marcus sat heavily on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his greying hair. Her name was Lily. She'd be about Emma's age now if... He stopped, swallowed hard. There was an accident. A drunk driver ran a red light when my wife was picking Lily up from school. Sarah felt her anger dissolve into something raw, more complicated. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. But why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd look at me differently. Wonder if I was some kind of predator targeting kids who looked like my daughter. Wonder if I was using Emma to fill some void." His voice cracked slightly. "Maybe you'd be right to wonder. Is that what you're doing?" The question hung between them like a blade. Marcus looked at Emma, absorbed in her cartoons, and something painful flickered across his features. "I don't know anymore. At first, I just wanted to help. You were both in danger, and I had nothing left to lose. But watching her laugh, seeing her trust me..." He shook his head. "It hurts in ways I didn't expect, and it heals things I thought were permanently broken." Sarah studied his profile, trying to reconcile this new information with everything she thought she knew about him. "Where were you today?" "Following up on something. The man who's been tracking you. I think I know who hired him." The shift in conversation made Sarah's pulse quicken. "What did you find out?" Marcus pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, smoothing it out on the bed between them. It was a printout of a news article, dated 2 weeks ago. The headline read, "Local businessman's son dies in overdose." Below it was a photo that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the dealer Emma saw. Richard Castellano Jr., 23 years old, son of Richard Castellano Sr., who owns half the construction companies in the state and has suspected ties to organized crime." Marcus's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the tension in his jaw. Junior died of a heroin overdose in an abandoned warehouse. Same warehouse where Emma witnessed that murder. Sarah's mind raced, connecting dots that painted an increasingly terrifying picture. So the man who was killed was probably the dealer Castellano Sr. held responsible for his son's death. And Emma is the only witness to what happened that night. "Oh, God." Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. "No wonder they haven't given up. It's not just about silencing a witness. It's personal." Marcus nodded grimly. "Men like Castellano don't let things go, ever, and they have resources we can't compete with." Sarah looked at Emma, still innocent and oblivious, humming that haunting melody Marcus's daughter used to sing. The weight of their situation settled over her like a burial shroud. They weren't just running from street thugs or even professional criminals. They were up against someone with power, money, and a father's grief driving him toward vengeance. "What do we do?" she asked, though part of her feared the answer. Marcus folded the paper carefully, his expression hardening with resolve. "We disappear, really disappear this time. New identities, new lives, somewhere Castellano's reach can't find us." Is that even possible? For the right price, anything's possible. But Sarah, he met her eyes directly. Once we go down this road, there's no coming back. Emma will never be able to see her friends again, go to her old school, live the life you planned for her. Sarah watched her daughter color, small tongue poking out in concentration, and felt her heart breaking for all the futures that would never be. The rain hammered against the warehouse windows as Sarah paced the length of the makeshift living space, her wet shoes squeaking against the concrete floor. Marcus sat hunched over a laptop he'd somehow acquired, his fingers flying across the keys with a familiarity that made her stomach clench with fresh doubt. "You need to tell me who you really are," she said, stopping directly behind him. No more deflections, no more half-truths. Marcus's hands stilled. On the screen, she could see what looked like encrypted files, strings of code that meant nothing to her but everything to him, apparently. Emma slept fitfully on the air mattress nearby, her small body curled around the stuffed elephant Sarah had managed to grab during their hasty escape from the motel. "My real name is Marcus Chen," he said without turning around. "I used to work for the government, cybersecurity division." "Used to?" "I found something I wasn't supposed to find." His voice carried a weight that spoke of consequences she couldn't yet fathom. "Your husband's pharmaceutical company, Meridian Corp. They've been running illegal trials, not just cutting corners on FDA approval, something much worse." Sarah's legs felt weak. She sank onto an overturned crate, her mind reeling. David would never... David's been dead for 18 months, Sarah. Marcus finally turned to face her, his eyes holding a gentleness that somehow made the words cut deeper. "The man who's been living in your house, sleeping in your bed, playing father to Emma, that's someone else entirely." The world tilted. Sarah gripped the edge of the crate, her knuckles white. "That's impossible. I would know. I'm his wife. I would know if..." Facial reconstruction surgery, voice coaching. They gave him your husband's memories through hypnotherapy and pharmaceutical enhancement. Marcus pulled up a file on a laptop, angling the screen toward her. "His real name is Vincent Caruso, former military, discharged under suspicious circumstances. Meridian hired him for a very specific job." The photograph on the screen showed a man who looked nothing like David, yet when she studied the eyes, the way he held his mouth, something cold unfurled in her chest. There were similarities hidden beneath the surface, mannerisms she'd attributed to stress, but now recognized as foreign. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. To maintain the facade while they completed their trials. David discovered what they were doing to homeless populations in major cities, using them as test subjects for experimental drugs. He was going to blow the whistle. Marcus's jaw tightened. They killed him before he could. Sarah doubled over, bile rising in her throat. The man she'd made love to, trusted with her daughter, argued with about mundane household decisions. He was a stranger wearing her husband's face. "How long have you known?" "Since before I met you." Marcus closed the laptop gently. "I've been tracking Meridian's operations for 2 years. When I got too close, they destroyed my life, made me disappear. Officially, Marcus Chen died in a car accident 14 months ago. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. You've been watching us. Protecting you." He stood slowly, his movements careful as if approaching a wounded animal. Vincent was supposed to play the grieving widower for 6 months, then disappear with Emma. A tragic murder-suicide, maybe. Leave no loose ends. "Emma?" Sarah's voice cracked. "What does Emma have to do with any of this?" Marcus hesitated, and she saw something flicker across his face, a pain so deep it made her chest ache in sympathy. David wasn't just a whistleblower. He took something when he tried to expose them. Research data, financial records, names of everyone involved. He hid it. Somewhere only Emma could lead them to. Marcus ran a hand through his graying hair. "Children see things adults miss, remember details we dismiss." David spent his last weeks teaching her games, hiding spots, special places that meant something only to the two of them. Sarah thought of Emma's recent nightmares, Her insistence that Daddy wasn't Daddy anymore, the way she'd started hiding things in impossible places throughout the house. Not childhood games, survival instincts. She knows, Sarah breathed. Somewhere inside, she knows he's not her father. Kids are intuitive about deception in ways we've forgotten how to be. Marcus moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boards. That's why Vincent's been getting frustrated, why the mask has been slipping. She won't trust him the way David needed her to. Thunder rolled overhead, and Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring words Sarah couldn't quite catch. But Marcus went rigid, his attention snapping to the child. What did she say? Something about the butterfly house. Sarah knelt beside Emma, brushing damp hair from her daughter's forehead. She's been talking about it for weeks. We don't have a butterfly house. Marcus turned from the window, his expression intense. David did. There's a conservatory at his research facility where he used to take Emma on weekends. If he hid something there, a sound from outside cut him off. Footsteps splashing through puddles, multiple sets moving with purpose. They'd been found. The warehouse felt different in daylight, shadows sharper and more defined through the grimy windows. Sarah sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, watching Emma sleep fitfully on the makeshift bed. 3 days had passed since Marcus revealed his past, and the weight of his confession hung between them like smoke. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through everything he'd told her. The dead girl, the accident that wasn't quite an accident, the way his hands had trembled when he spoke about blood on broken glass. Part of her wanted to grab Emma and run, but where would they go? Detective Chen was still looking for them, and winter was settling in with brutal efficiency. Marcus emerged from the shadows near the loading dock, a paper bag in his hands. "Coffee," he said quietly, settling beside her. "And something else." Sarah accepted the cup gratefully, inhaling the bitter warmth. "What else?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a cell phone. Not his usual burner, but something sleeker, more expensive. "I made some calls last night. People I used to know." "What kind of people?" "The kind who owe me favors." His fingers drummed against his knee. "There's a way out of this, Sarah, for you and Emma. But you're not going to like it." She set down her coffee, ice forming in her stomach. "Tell me." "My contact in the prosecutor's office confirmed what we suspected. Chen's been feeding information to your ex-husband. Ryan knows you're in the city, knows you're with someone. He's got private investigators working the shelters, the churches, anywhere desperate people might go. How long before they find us?" "Days, maybe less." Marcus stood and began pacing, his movements restless and predatory. "But there's something else. Something about the night Emma was hurt." Sarah's breath caught. "What about it?" "Hospital records show Ryan brought her in, claimed she fell downstairs. But the injuries don't match his story. The doctor who treated her made notes. Suspicious notes. I tried to tell them." "I know you did. But now there's someone willing to listen. Dr. Patricia Valdez. She's been documenting cases like Emma's for years, building files the system can't ignore." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, fragile as candlelight. "What does that mean for us?" Marcus stopped pacing, his back to her. "It means you need to surface, officially, work with the authorities instead of running from them. Are you insane? The moment I show my face, you'll have protection. Real protection. Not whatever I can give you hiding in abandoned buildings." He turned to face her, and she saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes: vulnerability. "You'll have a chance at a real life." Sarah stared at him, understanding blooming, cold and sharp. "You're talking about me surfacing, not us." His silence was answer enough. "Marcus, no. We stick together. That's what we agreed. What we agreed was that I'd keep you and Emma safe. This is how I do that." He knelt beside her, his voice urgent and low. "Dr. Valdez has connections. Child advocacy groups, lawyers who specialize in custody cases involving abuse. They can protect you in ways I can't. And what happens to you?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Marcus reached out and touched her hand. his fingers warm and rough. I disappear, like I should have done months ago. No, the word came out fiercer than she intended, startling them both. Absolutely not. Sarah? I said no. She gripped his hand tightly. You don't get to make this decision for us. We're family now, the three of us. Broken and weird and probably doomed, but family. Emma stirred on the makeshift bed, mumbling something in her sleep. Both adults turned toward her, the conversation pausing. Sarah watched her daughter's face, still too pale but peaceful in sleep. When had she started thinking of Marcus as part of their family? When had the three of them stopped being strangers sharing space and started being something more? The police are still looking for you, Sarah said finally. This Dr. Valdez, these advocacy groups, can they protect you too? Marcus shook his head slowly. What I did, what I'm running from, that's different. That's criminal. They can't make that disappear. Maybe not, but maybe there's another way. Sarah, just listen. She turned to face him fully, her mind racing through possibilities. You said the girl's death was an accident, that you panicked, made bad choices afterward. What if instead of running again, you faced it, properly this time? The idea terrified her even as she spoke it. The thought of Marcus in custody, of losing the strange, complicated safety he'd given them. But she could see in his eyes that he'd considered it too, that he was as tired of running as she was. Outside, wind rattled the warehouse walls, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Time was running out for all of them. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped steadily from the fire escape outside Marcus's window, each drop marking time like a countdown. Sarah sat on the edge of his narrow bed, watching him pace the small room with the restless energy of a caged animal. Emma slept fitfully in the corner, her small body curled around the stuffed rabbit that had somehow survived their flight from the motel. We can't stay here much longer, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. They'll find this place eventually. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the burner phone Detective Rodriguez had given her. The screen remained dark, silent. No word from the safe house, no updates on Vincent's whereabouts. The waiting was eating her alive. Tell me about the warehouse, she said suddenly. The one where Vincent held you. Marcus stopped pacing, his shoulders tensing. Sarah, no more protecting me. If we're going to survive this, I need to know everything. She stood facing him across the cramped room. You said Vincent was your handler. What did that mean exactly? The silence stretched between them, filled only by Emma's soft breathing and the persistent drip of water. Marcus moved to the window, peering through a gap in the blinds at the empty street below. I wasn't just muscle for hire, he said finally. Vincent ran a network, kids mostly, some adults who had nowhere else to go, people society had forgotten about. His voice carried the weight of old shame. He gave us purpose, he said. Made us feel like we belonged somewhere. Sarah felt her stomach clench. What kind of purpose? Information gathering, surveillance. Sometimes we'd get close to targets, gain their trust. He turned from the window, his eyes dark with memory. I was good at it. Too good. Vincent said I had a gift for making people believe I was someone I wasn't. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought of how quickly she'd trusted him, how natural it had felt to let him into her life, into Emma's life. Was it all an act, when you helped us? No, the word came out sharp, desperate. That's what I'm trying to tell you. By the time Vincent gave me the job of watching you and Emma, I was already planning to get out. I'd been stockpiling money, gathering evidence against him. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from every movement. When I saw you that night, saw how scared you were, how hard you were fighting for her. A soft knock at the door froze them both. 3 short taps, then 2 long ones. The signal Rodriguez had taught them. Marcus moved swiftly to the door, checking the peephole before sliding back the chain. Detective Rodriguez stepped inside, her coat damp with rain, her expression grim. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Vincent's lawyer posted bail an hour ago. He's out. Sarah's legs went weak. She sank back onto the bed, her mind reeling. How is that possible? You said the charges we could make stick weren't enough to hold him. Money laundering, tax evasion. His team of lawyers made it look like paperwork errors. Rodriguez's jaw was tight with frustration. The trafficking charges need more evidence, and the witness we were counting on disappeared. Disappeared or was disappeared? Marcus asked. Rodriguez's silence was answer enough. Emma stirred in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Sarah moved to her daughter's side, smoothing the dark hair back from her forehead. The simple gesture grounded her, reminded her what was at stake. "So what now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "The safe house is still compromised. Vincent has connections everywhere." Rodriguez pulled out a tablet, showing them a map of the city marked with red dots. "These are places he controls or influences. Hotels, shelters, even some police precincts." Marcus studied the map, his expression thoughtful. "There's somewhere he doesn't know about. Somewhere I never told him." Both women turned to him. Sarah felt a flicker of hope despite everything. "My sister," Marcus continued. "I told Vincent she was dead, but she's not. She lives upstate, runs a small farm. Vincent doesn't know because I made sure of it. Fake death certificate, changed identity, the works." "Why didn't you tell us about her before?" Rodriguez demanded. "Because bringing you into her life puts her at risk too. But if Vincent's free..." Marcus met Sarah's eyes across the room. "She's the only family I have left, the only person I trust completely." Sarah looked down at Emma, still sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding them. Her daughter deserved a chance at something better than this endless running, this constant fear. "How do we know Vincent won't follow us there?" "We don't," Marcus admitted. "But it's our best shot at buying time while Detective Rodriguez builds a case that will actually stick." The weight of decision pressed down on Sarah's chest. Trust again, risk again, hope again. Outside, the rain began to fall once more. The warehouse felt smaller now, suffocating in its silence. Sarah pressed her back against the cold concrete wall, watching Marcus pace near the windows like a caged animal. 3 days had passed since Detective Chen's visit, and the weight of unspoken truths hung between them like a loaded gun. Emma sat cross-legged on the makeshift bed, drawing stick figures in a notebook they'd found abandoned in one of the storage rooms. Her fever had broken completely, color returning to her cheeks. But Sarah couldn't shake the image of her daughter's pale face from that terrifying night, the night that had changed everything. "We can't stay here forever," Marcus said finally, his voice cutting through the tension. He turned from the window, and Sarah saw something different in his eyes, a hardness that hadn't been there before. "I know." Sarah's fingers worried the edge of Emma's blanket. "But where can we go? Chen knows about you now, about us." Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice so Emma couldn't hear. "There's something I need to tell you, about why Chen really came here." Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd known this moment would come, had felt it building like a storm on the horizon. "What is it?" "The man you killed, David Morrison, he wasn't just some random attacker." Marcus ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "He was a federal informant." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She gripped the wall behind her, struggling to breathe. "What?" "Morrison was feeding information to the FBI about a money laundering operation. Big players, international scope. The kind of case that makes careers." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper now. "And I was his handler." Sarah stared at him, the pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. "Your FBI." "Was. I was FBI." Marcus's laugh was bitter, hollow, until Morrison disappeared and I became the prime suspect in his murder. The betrayal cut deeper than Sarah had thought possible. She'd trusted this man, let him into their lives, into Emma's heart. "You've been lying to me this entire time." "No." Marcus stepped toward her, but she flinched away. "Everything I told you about being homeless, about having nowhere to go, that's all true. The Bureau thinks I killed Morrison and stole the evidence he was gathering. They stripped my badge, froze my assets, destroyed my life. But you didn't kill him." "I didn't kill him." You did. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Sarah felt the familiar wave of nausea that came whenever she remembered that night. Morrison's hands around her throat, Emma screaming, the kitchen knife sliding between his ribs with sickening ease. Self-defense, she whispered. I know that. You know that. But try explaining it to a federal prosecutor who's been building a case for 2 years. Marcus moved to the window again, peering through the grimy glass. Morrison was supposed to meet me that night. When he didn't show, I went looking. Found his car in your neighborhood, followed the trail of blood to your apartment. Sarah remembered finding Marcus in her kitchen, standing over Morrison's body like an avenging angel. She'd been too scared, too desperate to question the coincidence. You cleaned up the scene, she said slowly. You made him disappear. I panicked. Saw you and Emma covered in blood, knew what it would look like. Morrison was a violent bastard. I'd suspected for months that he was playing both sides, maybe working with the people he was supposed to be investigating, but I couldn't prove it. So you helped us. I helped you, and in doing so, I signed my own death warrant. The FBI thinks I killed their star witness. The criminals Morrison was supposed to be investigating think I'm still a Fed. And now Detective Chen is sniffing around, putting pieces together. Emma looked up from her drawing, sensing the tension in their hushed conversation. Mommy, is everything okay? Sarah forced a smile, moving to sit beside her daughter. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Keep drawing. But everything wasn't fine. Sarah could see the truth in Marcus's eyes, could feel it in the electric air of the warehouse. They were running out of time, out of options, out of places to hide. What do we do now? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying something outside the window. When he turned back, his expression was grim but determined. Chen offered you immunity in exchange for information about me. She thinks I killed Morrison and that you're protecting me out of fear or misguided loyalty. I would never. I know, but maybe you should. Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time to tell the truth, all of it. Marcus knelt beside them, his eyes finding Emma's before returning to Sarah's. But first, we need to find the evidence Morrison was gathering, the real reason someone wanted him dead. Because if we're going down, we're taking the bastards who destroyed our lives with us. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and Sarah realized their time of hiding was finally over. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Sarah pressed her back against the cold metal wall, Emma trembling beside her, while Marcus crouched near the broken window keeping watch. 3 hours had passed since they'd escaped the safe house, and Sarah's mind raced through everything that had unraveled. Detective Rodriguez wasn't just corrupt, he was the architect of the entire operation. The realization hit her like ice water when she'd seen him coordinating with the men who'd come for them. All those times he'd reassured her, promised protection, insisted she trust the system. He'd been herding her like livestock to slaughter. "Mama, I'm scared," Emma whispered, her small hand clutching Sarah's jacket. "I know, baby. We're going to be okay." The words felt hollow, but Emma needed them. Sarah needed them too. Marcus turned from the window, his face grim in the moonlight filtering through the grimy glass. "There's something else you need to know about your husband's research." Sarah's stomach clenched. "What now?" The memory manipulation technology, it wasn't just theoretical. David had built a working prototype. Marcus pulled a small device from his jacket, no larger than a smartphone. "This is it." The device looked innocuous, sleek black plastic with a few buttons and a small screen. Sarah stared at it, remembering David hunched over his computer late at night, the excited phone calls with colleagues, the way he'd grown increasingly secretive in those final weeks. "He never told me it was finished," she said quietly, "because he discovered what they really wanted it for." Marcus's voice carried years of buried pain. Not therapy for trauma victims, mass manipulation, political control. They could rewrite someone's entire belief system, make them forget their own children, turn them into perfect soldiers or unquestioning citizens. Emma stirred against Sarah's side, mumbling something in her sleep. Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair, the gesture automatic and protective. "Rodriguez has been cleaning up loose ends for 2 years," Marcus continued. "Anyone connected to the project who knew too much. Your husband wasn't the first to die, just the most visible. But why frame me? Why not just—" Sarah's voice caught. "Because David hid the real research. The files Rodriguez found were decoys. David suspected what they were planning and created a false trail. The real data is encoded in places they'd never think to look." Marcus gestured to Emma. "In children's drawings, in music files, in recipe cards. David scattered it across 100 seemingly innocent items." Sarah felt the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. That's why they want Emma alive. She might know where David hid things, or she might have seen something. And why they wanted you broken and desperate. Easier to manipulate someone who has nothing left to lose. A sound outside made them all freeze, the crunch of gravel under tires. Marcus moved to the window, peering through the gap in the boards they'd wedged there for camouflage. 3 cars. Rodriguez is with them. His voice was tight with controlled fear. "We need to move, now." Sarah scooped Emma up, her daughter's eyes fluttering open with confusion. "Shh, we're just going to play another hiding game." They moved deeper into the warehouse, Marcus leading them through a maze of abandoned machinery and moldering cardboard boxes. Sarah could hear car doors slamming outside, the murmur of voices organizing a search pattern. "There's a loading dock on the far side," Marcus whispered. "If we can reach it." A flashlight beam swept through the main entrance behind them. Heavy footsteps echoed off the concrete floor. "Sarah Chen." Rodriguez's voice boomed through the space, artificially friendly. "Let's end this. You're only making it harder on yourself and your daughter." They crouched behind a massive piece of machinery. Emma pressed between them. Sarah could feel her daughter's rapid heartbeat against her chest. "I know you can hear me, Sarah. You're not a killer. You're a mother who made a desperate choice. I understand that. But this man you're with, Marcus Webb, he's been lying to you." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. "Ask him about his real name, Sarah. Ask him about the family he abandoned. Ask him why he was really there that night you needed help." The flashlight beams were getting closer, sweeping methodically through their hiding spots. Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing something flicker across his face. Guilt, fear, resignation. "Marcus," she breathed. He met her eyes, and in that moment she saw the truth he'd been carrying. Whatever Rodriguez was about to reveal, it was real. "Later," he whispered, "if we survive this." The loading dock was 50 feet away through open space. The flashlights were 20 feet behind and closing. Emma's breathing was quick and shallow against Sarah's neck. Rodriguez's voice echoed again, closer now. "You have 30 seconds, Sarah. Then we start shooting, and I can't guarantee your daughter's safety." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every impossible choice that had led them here. The warehouse felt different in the pre-dawn darkness, shadows stretching like accusations across the concrete floor. Sarah clutched Emma's hand tighter as they followed Marcus through the maze of abandoned machinery, their footsteps echoing despite their attempts at silence. Every sound felt amplified, every creak of metal a potential death sentence. "The safe house is just beyond the loading dock," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of traffic. "Once we're there, I can explain everything." Sarah's mind raced with questions she couldn't voice, not with Emma pressed against her side, already traumatized enough for one lifetime. The little girl hadn't spoken since witnessing Detective Hayes' collapse in the motel parking lot, his blood spreading across the asphalt like spilled paint. Sarah still wasn't sure if Hayes was dead or alive, but the gunshots that followed their escape had painted a grim picture. They reached a heavy steel door marked with faded warnings about authorized personnel. Marcus produced a key from somewhere in his coat, and the lock turned with surprising ease. Beyond lay another corridor, this one cleaner, with fluorescent lights that flickered to life automatically. Motion sensors, Marcus explained, noting Sarah's startled expression. The whole place is wired. The corridor opened into a surprisingly well-appointed living space. Comfortable furniture, a kitchenette, even children's toys scattered in one corner. Sarah's confusion deepened. This wasn't some random hideout, this was someone's home. "Whose place is this?" she asked, settling Emma onto a small couch and pulling a blanket around her shoulders. Marcus moved to a wall of monitors, each screen showing different angles of the warehouse exterior. His fingers danced across a keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Mine. One of several, actually." The casual admission hit Sarah like a physical blow. "One of several?" "Marcus, who are you really?" He paused, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of his secrets was finally becoming unbearable. When he turned to face her, his eyes held years of pain she was only beginning to understand. 23 years ago, I was Detective Marcus Chen, SFPD. I had a partner named David Torres and a case that should have been routine, missing persons, a family that disappeared without a trace. His voice grew distant, lost in memory. The mother had gambling debts. The father was having an affair. Seemed obvious they'd just run. Sarah felt her breath catch. The name Torres was familiar, but she couldn't place it. We were wrong. They'd stumbled onto something bigger, a trafficking ring that moved people like cargo, children mostly. The family wasn't running from their problems, they were running for their lives. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. By the time we realized the truth, it was too late. What happened to them? David and I tracked them to a warehouse not unlike this one, but we weren't the only ones looking. His voice cracked slightly. Someone in the department was feeding information to the traffickers, someone we trusted. The monitors flickered, showing movement in the shadows outside. Marcus's attention snapped to the screens, his body tensing. "They found us." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Who? The police?" "Worse. The same people who killed that family 23 years ago. The same network that's been hunting you and Emma." He was already moving, grabbing a duffel bag from beneath the desk. "David Torres died trying to expose them. I've been hunting them ever since." "Torres," Sarah breathed, the name finally clicking into place. "Detective Torres. He was Emma's father's partner before he died." Marcus froze. "Emma's father was a cop?" "Undercover. He was investigating something when he was killed. I thought it was just a random robbery, but now the pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. He must have gotten too close." The sound of vehicles approaching cut through their conversation. Marcus's fingers flew over the keyboard again, and several screens switched to thermal imaging. At least 6 figures were surrounding the building, moving with military precision. "There's an exit tunnel through the basement," Marcus said, shouldering the bag and moving toward Emma. "But we need to go now." Sarah gathered her daughter, feeling the child's small body trembling with exhaustion and fear. "Emma, sweetheart, we need to move again." The little girl looked up with eyes far too old for her face. "Are the bad men coming?" Before Sarah could answer, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. On the monitors, the thermal signatures were converging on the building's entrances. "They're jamming the power grid," Marcus muttered, pulling out a flashlight. "Professional work." An explosion somewhere above them sent dust raining from the ceiling. Emma whimpered, and Sarah pulled her closer, following Marcus toward a hidden door she hadn't noticed before. As they descended into darkness, Sarah realized they weren't just running from corrupt cops or random criminals. They were running from something much larger, something that had been hunting families like theirs for decades. And somehow, Emma's father had died trying to expose it. The tunnel ahead stretched into blackness, their only hope a man whose secrets seemed to multiply with every revelation. Behind them, footsteps echoed in the safe house, growing closer. The warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, Maya trembling in her arms, while Daniel checked the perimeter one last time. Through the grimy windows, she could see the first pale hints of sunrise bleeding across the horizon. "They're coming," Daniel whispered, returning to their makeshift hiding spot behind a stack of rusted machinery. 3 cars, maybe more. We have minutes. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. After everything they'd uncovered about Marcus Blackwood's trafficking operation, after the evidence they'd gathered, and the contacts Daniel had reached out to, it still came down to this, running like animals with nowhere left to hide. Maya stirred in her arms, her fever finally breaking after 2 days of illness that had slowed their escape. "Mama, I'm scared." "I know, baby. But remember what Daniel taught you about being brave?" The little girl nodded, though her lip quivered. Over the past weeks, Daniel had become more than just their protector. He'd become the father Maya had never known, patient and gentle in ways that made Sarah's chest ache with emotions she didn't have time to examine. "The boat's still our best option," Daniel said, checking his phone for the last time before powering it down. "My contact at the marina confirmed it. Captain Rodriguez will take us to international waters, no questions asked." "And then what?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. They'd talked about this. New identities, a fresh start somewhere Blackwood's influence couldn't reach. But the reality of leaving everything behind, of becoming ghosts, felt crushing. Daniel's eyes found hers in the dim light. "Then we disappear. All of us." The weight of those words settled between them. 3 weeks ago, Daniel had been a stranger who'd helped her steal formula for Maya. Now he was offering to give up his own chance at redemption, his own path back to legitimacy, to keep them safe. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You could still turn us in, claim the reward money, start over clean." His expression hardened. "Is that what you think of me?" "No, Sarah stopped, hearing the hurt in his voice. "I think you're the best man I've ever known. That's why I can't ask you to throw your life away for us." "My life was already thrown away." Daniel moved closer, his voice dropping so Maya wouldn't hear. "The night I lost my family, I died too. I've just been walking around empty ever since. But you two, you brought me back. You gave me a reason to fight again." Outside, car doors slammed. Sarah's blood turned to ice as flashlight beams swept across the warehouse windows. Blackwood's men had found them. "This way," Daniel breathed, leading them deeper into the maze of abandoned equipment. He'd scouted 3 escape routes, but with men surrounding the building, their options were shrinking fast. They moved like shadows through the industrial graveyard, Maya clinging to Sarah's neck while Daniel navigated by memory. Behind them, voices echoed, harsh, professional, getting closer. There, Daniel pointed to a service tunnel barely visible in the far corner. "It leads to the storm drains. We can follow them to the waterfront." Sarah nodded, but as they crept forward, a new sound made them freeze. Helicopters, their rotors cutting through the morning air like mechanical wasps. Searchlights blazed to life, turning the warehouse into a fishbowl. "Run," Daniel ordered. They sprinted for the tunnel as shouts erupted behind them. Sarah's legs burned, Maya's weight throwing off her balance, but Daniel's hand on her back kept her upright. The tunnel entrance loomed ahead, 20 feet, then 10. A gunshot cracked through the air, then another. Sarah screamed, expecting pain, but Daniel shoved her forward into the darkness of the tunnel just as concrete chips exploded where her head had been. "Go, go, go," he shouted, dropping to one knee and returning fire with a pistol she hadn't known he carried. The muzzle flashes lit his face in stark relief. No longer the gentle man who'd read Maya bedtime stories, but the soldier he'd once been. Sarah crawled through the tunnel, Maya sobbing against her shoulder. Behind them, the gunfire intensified. Then, suddenly, horribly, it stopped. "Daniel!" she called back. Silence. "Daniel!" She turned around, started back toward the entrance, but his voice cut through the darkness. "Keep going. Don't stop, no matter what you hear." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by terror. He was alive, but he was buying them time with his life. She could hear boots in the tunnel now, voices coordinating their pursuit. The storm drain opened ahead, ankle-deep water rushing toward the harbor. Sarah splashed forward, following the concrete channel as it curved underground. Maya had gone quiet, sensing the gravity of their flight. Behind them, more gunshots echoed through the tunnel. Closer now, the sound compressed and magnified by the concrete walls. Sarah ran faster, her lungs burning, knowing that their salvation lay somewhere in the growing dawn light ahead. The warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah crouched behind a stack of crates, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched Marcus circle the perimeter with practiced precision. Emma pressed against her side, trembling but silent, understanding without words that their lives depended on absolute quiet. "I know you're here," Vincent's voice echoed from somewhere in the shadows. "Did you really think you could run from me forever, Marcus? From what you owe me?" Marcus emerged from behind a concrete pillar, his hands visible but his stance ready. "I don't owe you anything anymore, Vincent. That debt died with Elena." "Elena?" Vincent's laugh was razor-sharp. "Still carrying that guilt, aren't you? Still believing it was your fault she got caught in the crossfire of your betrayal?" Sarah's breath caught. "Elena!" The name Marcus whispered in his sleep, the ghost that haunted his eyes when he thought no one was looking. She squeezed Emma tighter, pieces of Marcus's past crystallizing into a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see clearly. "You want to know the truth about that night?" Vincent stepped into a shaft of pale light, filtering through a broken skylight. Even in the dim illumination, Sarah could see the cruel satisfaction twisting his features. "Elena didn't die because of your choices, Marcus. She died because I needed you broken. Because a man drowning in grief doesn't ask inconvenient questions about missing evidence or witness testimonies that don't quite add up." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah felt Marcus's anguish like a physical force radiating through the warehouse. "You killed her." Marcus's voice was barely human, a sound like breaking glass. "You killed your own partner." "I did what needed to be done, just like I'm going to do now." Vincent's hand moved to his weapon. "You see, Marcus, you've become inconvenient again. And this time you've dragged innocence into it." Sarah's mind raced. They were trapped, outnumbered, with nowhere to run. But as Vincent continued his monologue, she noticed something he hadn't, the subtle movement of shadows along the far wall. Marcus had positioned them here for a reason. "Detective Chen should be finding the evidence we planted about now," Vincent continued. "Amazing how easy it is to manufacture a drug operation when you have access to the evidence locker." Sarah Morrison, desperate mother turned dealer to pay for her daughter's medical bills, it's almost poetic. Emma's small hand found Sarah's, squeezing with surprising strength. In that touch, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but underneath it burned something fiercer. The absolute refusal to let this man destroy what they'd built together, this fragile family forged from desperation and trust. Marcus took a step forward. "It's over, Vincent. Even if you kill us, the real evidence is already in the right hands. Chen isn't the only honest cop left. You're bluffing." "Am I?" Marcus's smile was cold as winter steel. "Did you really think I'd spend 2 years on the streets without building insurance? Every dirty deal, every planted piece of evidence, every murdered witness, it's all documented. The only reason you're still breathing is because I needed you to confess to Elena's murder." Vincent's composure cracked. "You recorded nothing. You have nothing." Sarah's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The phone in Marcus's pocket, the one he'd been so careful with, the one that never seemed to lose battery despite their circumstances. It had been recording this entire time. "Signal should be strong enough here," Marcus murmured, just loud enough for his voice to carry. "Thanks for the confession, Vincent. Detective Rodriguez has been listening to every word." The sound of sirens in the distance made Vincent's face go white. "You son of a—" He drew his weapon, but Marcus was already moving, years of training and rage propelling him forward. They collided in a tangle of limbs and fury, the gun skittering across the concrete floor. Sarah didn't hesitate. Pushing Emma behind the crates, she lunged for the weapon. Her fingers closed around cold metal just as Vincent broke free from Marcus's grip, blood streaming from his nose. "Drop it!" Sarah's voice rang out across the warehouse, steadier than she'd ever heard it. The gun felt impossibly heavy in her hands, but her aim never wavered. Vincent froze, calculating. Marcus climbed to his feet, his eyes never leaving his former partner's face. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights began to strobe through the warehouse windows. "It's over," Marcus said quietly. Finally over. As the first officers burst through the warehouse doors, Sarah felt Emma's arms wrap around her waist. They'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, they'd all survived. But as she watched Vincent being led away in handcuffs, Sarah knew the real test was just beginning. They'd faced the darkness together and emerged intact, but now they had to figure out how to live in the light. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Sarah watched Marcus teach Emma how to flip pancakes. 3 months had passed since that night in the warehouse, and the simple domesticity of breakfast felt like a miracle she was still learning to trust. "Higher, Uncle Marcus!" Emma giggled as a pancake sailed through the air, landing perfectly in the pan. "Did you see that, Mama?" Sarah smiled, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "I saw it, sweetheart. You're getting good at that." Marcus caught her eye over Emma's head, and something passed between them, an understanding built on shared trauma and unexpected grace. The bruises had faded, but the scars ran deeper. They were all still healing, still learning how to be a family forged in crisis rather than blood. The doorbell rang, and Sarah's body went rigid. Even now, unexpected visitors sent ice through her veins. Marcus noticed immediately, his hand finding her shoulder. "I'll get it," he said quietly. Through the kitchen doorway, Sarah heard familiar voices, Detective Chen and Dr. Rodriguez from the Children's Hospital. Her grip tightened on the mug. "Sarah," Detective Chen said as they entered the kitchen, "sorry to interrupt your morning. We have some news about Victor Kane's organization." Emma looked up from her pancakes, sensing the shift in mood. Marcus moved closer to her, his protective instincts still sharp. "The financial investigation uncovered something significant," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "The children's ward received anonymous donations totaling nearly $2 million over the past 5 years. The money was funneled through shell companies, but we've traced it back to Kane." Sarah frowned. "I don't understand." "Kane was using the hospital as a front," Detective Chen explained. "But here's the thing. Every penny of that money actually went to legitimate medical care for children who couldn't afford it, including Emma's treatments." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She set down her mug with shaking hands. "What are you saying?" "Kane paid for Emma's cancer treatments," Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "All of them. The insurance claims you thought were approved? They were denied. Kane's foundation covered everything. The surgeries, the chemotherapy, the medications, everything." Marcus's hand tightened on Sarah's shoulder as she processed this revelation. "But why?" Detective Chen shifted uncomfortably. "We found personal files in Kane's office. Sarah, he knew your husband. They served together in Afghanistan in the same unit. Your husband saved Kane's life during an ID explosion." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft sizzle of the forgotten pancakes on the stove. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. David had mentioned a Victor during his deployment, a commanding officer he'd pulled from a burning vehicle, but the last name had been different then. Morrison, not Kane. "Kane changed his name when he came back," Detective Chen continued. "Built his empire, but he never forgot what David did for him. When he learned about Emma's diagnosis, about your financial struggles, he made sure she got the best care possible." "He was watching us," Sarah whispered, pieces clicking into place. "All this time." "The trafficking, the illegal activities, those were real," Dr. Rodriguez emphasized. "Kane was a dangerous man who made terrible choices. But when it came to your family, his motives were different. He felt he owed David a debt." Emma tugged on Marcus's shirt. "Is Daddy a hero?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, kiddo, your daddy was definitely a hero." Sarah stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, neighborhood children played in the yard across the street, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze, normal life continuing despite everything. "What happens now?" she asked without turning around. "The legal proceedings continue," Detective Chen said. "Kane's organization is finished. The other victims are getting help. Your testimony was crucial in shutting down the trafficking ring. And the money? The legitimate donations stay where they are," Dr. Rodriguez answered. "Kane's will specified that any medical funds should continue supporting children's health care. Emma's future treatments, if needed, are covered." After the visitors left, Sarah found herself sitting on Emma's bed, holding a photo of David in his military uniform. Marcus appeared in the doorway, giving her space but staying close enough to offer comfort. "I hated him," Sarah said finally. "I wanted him dead for what he took from us, what he threatened, but he also kept Emma alive." "People aren't just one thing," Marcus replied, settling beside her. "Kane made choices that hurt a lot of people, but maybe in the end he tried to honor something good too." Emma bounded into the room, maple syrup still sticky on her cheek. "Can we go to the park today? All three of us?" Sarah looked at her daughter, alive, healthy, surrounded by love that had emerged from the darkest circumstances. She thought of David, of debts paid and prices extracted, of the complex web of choices that had brought them to this moment. "Yes," she said, standing and taking Emma's hand while reaching for Marcus with the other. "Let's go to the park." Outside, the sun climbed higher, warming their faces as they walked forward together, not the family any of them had planned, but the one they'd fought to become.